On today's show, we're talking about the joy of sharing, and sharing food is my absolute favorite thing to do. I always say it's my love language. So we're gonna start with a really easy pasta dish. It's a no-boil baked rigatoni. All you need is some dry pasta. I use rigatoni, hence the name rigatoni. 1 cup of shredded cheese, a 1/4 cup of Parmesan, 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic. We're also going to use a jar of any type of marinara sauce that you like and 3 cups of water. So super simple. You could definitely add some protein to this dish as well, like pepperonis or sausage would be delicious. But I love this because it really is as simple as these ingredients. So to start, we're going to add the dry pasta to a 9x13 baking pan that I sprayed with cooking spray. Then we're going to add 3 cups of water and the marinara sauce. And what I love about this dish is it's really all pretty much stuff that you have on hand. So whenever somebody is going through a really hard time and I didn't expect it, like someone calls me up and says, hey, I'm not feeling good, and especially if they're a mom with little kids, I know how tough it is to also feed your family. So I love to make this dish because I just think, okay, I have everything at home to make this. I could quickly whip this up and it wouldn't even make me bat an eye. It's literally that fast. And it's great because then I can bring a warm homemade dish to their doorstep and deliver it to them. And it's such a great way to show that you care. So I added my seasonings. I'm gonna give this a really good stir. And while I do that, I'm also going to add most of the Parmesan cheese. And this doesn't look like much right now. In fact, it looks a little bit strange to have this dry, hard pasta being, stirred together with water, sauce, and seasonings. But I'm telling you, it comes together so beautifully. The pasta cooks up and soaks up all of those spices and flavors, and it's really warm and comforting. Then I'm gonna top it with the shredded cheese. It almost tastes like lasagna, but in a really easy way to make it. And then we got the rest of the Parmesan we're gonna sprinkle on top. Now I'm just gonna cover it with some foil. And sometimes, especially with dishes with cheese on top, you might wanna spray the foil with a little bit of cooking spray or use nonstick foil just to make sure that that cheese doesn't stick to the foil. And I'm gonna bake this 350 degrees for 50 minutes, then I'll take off the foil. And what you could do is you could sprinkle it with a little more cheese if you'd like, or you can just finish baking it off, let the cheese melt all the way through for about 10 minutes. When it comes to sharing food, I think of casseroles. That is like the most warm, homey, wonderful dish to share. So I have a clean eating chicken and rice bake. Now what makes this dish clean eating is the fact that we don't use any cream of soup. So like cream of mushroom, cream of chicken. And really, if you ever look in the ingredients on one of those cans, you'll be alarmed to see what they put in those. So it's really easy to make your own creamy sauce, and I'm gonna show you how to do that in this recipe. All you need for this recipe is 1 pound or so of chicken breast, 2 bags of frozen broccoli florets, or you can use fresh, 2 cups of chicken broth, 8 ounces of cream cheese, and I like to use Greek yogurt cream cheese, but any kind will work, 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, 1 cup of shredded cheese, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a 1/3 cup of breadcrumbs, 3/4 cup of rice, and I use brown basmati rice, so any kind of brown rice is gonna be a little bit healthier, 1 teaspoon of minced garlic, and some lemon juice. Okay, so we're gonna warm up a pan over medium-high heat, and we're gonna start by adding 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. to the pan. And you just want to get that so that it cooks just a little bit for about a minute in that warm pan. You want to do that anytime you add spices, especially raw garlic or onion to a pan. Add it first because that allows the flavor to really come out as it cooks in the hot pan. If you add it second or third as an ingredient, it usually just kind of gets slightly heated up and really the flavor doesn't fully come out of it. So you want to wait till it kind of sizzles and you just kind of let it all get warmed up in that pan. And it's absolutely delicious that way. Then we're going to add 2 cups of chicken broth. And then we're going to add the whole 8-ounce block of cream cheese. And this is what makes the sauce really creamy. So we're just going to kind of break it up a little bit so it can cook quicker in that warm chicken broth. And we're just going to let that heat up for a few minutes just until it's warm enough to start to melt that cream cheese. So as you can see, the sauce is simmering nicely and the cream cheese is starting to warm up and just melt into that sauce. So I'm going to take a whisk, and this is a really good tool to use for this, and really just get the cream cheese whisked in so that it's nice and smooth. And to the sauce, I'm going to add a half teaspoon of salt. And we're going to do the Parmesan cheese in there. Just continue to whisk as you add everything in. And if you find like there are clumps at all of the cream cheese, just turn up the heat just a little bit. And the warmer that cream cheese gets, it will melt beautifully in the sauce. Okay, now I'm going to add some lemon juice. So you can do like a 1/4 cup of lemon juice or just the juice of 1 whole lemon. The lemon juice just adds a little bit of flavor to the sauce. A little bit of freshness and zestiness. Is that a word? Zestiness? It's my made-up word. All right, so this sauce is looking really good. You can see how creamy that's looking. And you don't want it to be thick because you're gonna end up baking everything in this sauce. So you don't want it to get too thickened up on the stove. It will thicken up in the oven. So we're gonna add this to our baking dish along with the chicken, rice, and broccoli, and we're gonna bake it off. Okay, so we have our creamy sauce made for the chicken casserole. Now we're gonna add our chicken, and I just cubed it up into bite-sized cubes, and that will just bake right in the pan. So that's the lovely part of this dish. You don't have to cook the chicken ahead of time. You don't have to cook the broccoli or the rice. It all does the work right in the oven. And then we're gonna add our broccoli florets. Now I did use frozen because that's my go-to. I love frozen veggies because it's already washed and cut for you. So if you're gonna use frozen, just thaw them out first. And I just did that in the microwave. Then we have our rice, and we're gonna add our cream sauce over the top. Then I'm just gonna stir this up just so everything gets baked in that sauce. And again, this is one of those things, it's just like the pasta dish. It doesn't look great when I'm, mixing this all together because it's raw chicken and dry rice and uncooked broccoli. But I'm telling you, once everything gets baked together in the oven, it is so warm and comforting and delicious. It is the perfect dish to make if you're gonna give someone some food. And what I love about casseroles too is they freeze wonderfully. So I find whenever I bring people a dish, they're usually getting dishes from other people, right? There's a reason. They're having a baby, they've been to the hospital, maybe they don't feel good. There's always a reason that you're usually bringing people food unless you're Dashing Dish and you have a plethora of food and you're just bringing people food all the time. But that being said, a lot of times people don't have the capacity to eat every single meal that's being brought to them. So if you make them something that freezes well, that's really thoughtful because then they can pop it in the freezer and take it out when they've ran out of dishes that other people have made them. So now we're gonna top this with cheese and some breadcrumbs. So I just have some shredded cheese here, and this is gonna melt so good. Now, if you are gonna make this ahead for someone and you assume that they'll pop it in the freezer, you could always give them the dish with a little baggie of cheese, and that way they can put it on right before they bake it, which I find it tastes the best. You can freeze the cheese once you bake it and freeze it, but I just find it tastes best when you top it with cheese right before you put it in the oven. And then we're gonna top it with our breadcrumbs. And you know, I always encourage people, maybe making food is not your thing. Maybe you love to help in other ways. Maybe you could help with someone's children and you love taking care of kids. Find the thing that brings you joy in sharing. Maybe it's your time, maybe it's another talent that you have. But we all have gifts and talents that we can share with people. Mine just happens to be food, but find a way that you can help those in need using the gifts and talents that God has given you. So now I'm gonna top this with foil. I'm gonna bake it 375 for 30 minutes, and then I'm gonna remove the foil and bake it for another 10 minutes. Coming up next, with just a few simple ingredients, this skinny Mexican lasagna is gluten-free and easy to assemble, making it an ideal dish to share. Joyful whenever you're ready. You're gonna use that. I know it.
Don't give it. It's
Rob.
Rob. It's Rob's fault.
I'm gonna come after you. You too. So next up, we're gonna be making one of my personal favorite comfort foods, and really that is anything that is Mexican inspired. We're gonna make my Mexican lasagna. We're gonna start with 3 to 4 cups of shredded chicken, and you just wanna do chicken that's already been cooked that you shred up or you dice up, and it doesn't have to be a precise measurement, but about 3 to 4 cups, and that'll be about 1.5 pounds of chicken that's cooked. We're gonna do 1 can of corn, a can of black beans, some enchilada sauce, 1 cup of Greek yogurt, and 2 cups of shredded cheese. Then just for the seasoning, we have 2 teaspoons of chili powder and 2 teaspoons of cumin. And then some tortillas. Now I use corn tortillas because that's what I personally like. They hold up really well in this lasagna, but if you prefer almond flour or white tortillas, you could use that as well. So we're gonna start by making the 2 different fillings for this lasagna. It's just like an Italian style lasagna in the fact that there's layers, but it's all Mexican inspired and it's so easy to make. So we're just gonna do our shredded chicken in there, our enchilada sauce, our black beans. Now if you like pinto beans or a different type of bean, you could do that as well. And then corn. Now if you are doing lower carb and you don't want to add the beans or the corn, you could add something else like cauliflower rice or something like green chili, something that gives it some Mexican flavor and adds a little bit of nutrition. But I find that the protein in this dish is really, really balanced with the carbohydrates in the beans and the corn. And that's really how I tend to eat, is just balancing everything out. I don't eat low carb per se, but I definitely try and balance my carbs with healthy fats as well as proteins. Then we're gonna make our creamy layer, which is going to be Greek yogurt and our seasonings. So 2 teaspoons of each of these seasonings, or you could use your favorite taco seasonings. About 1 to 2 tablespoons should be good. You just want to flavor the Greek yogurt. So we're going to stir that up, get that all mixed in. Okay, so now I'm going to take a 9 by 13 baking dish and I'm going to spray it with cooking spray. And I'm going to start by layering some of the tortillas. They're all going to be different size tortillas depending on what you use. So I'm not going to tell you that you need to necessarily use 6, just enough to kind of cover the bottom. So we're gonna have them overlap just a little bit, and I'm gonna use 6 tortillas. Then I'm gonna add some of this chicken mixture. You can always use a measuring cup to kind of help you pour it in, or you can kind of just pour it in like that. It already looks so good, and it's not even baked up yet. Okay, so then we're gonna do half of this Greek yogurt mixture on top of the chicken. You just wanna kind of spread it out as much as you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's just like a lasagna. It'll all just bake together and be wonderful. Okay, now we're gonna top it with some more tortillas. So essentially we're just repeating the layers that we just did, and we're gonna try and use up the rest of our ingredients. My favorite time to share food with people is when they're having a baby, because since I just recently went through that, I remember so deeply what it meant to me when people brought me meals. I'll never forget my absolute most meaningful time that I had in the hospital was when my sisters brought me food after I had my babies. Like, that was like the most meaningful thing that they could do. And maybe it's because I love to share food with people so much, and like I said, that's my love language. But when they brought me food, my sister Sarah brought me a salad. It was like the best tasting thing I've ever put in my mouth after I had a baby. So, you know, sometimes the hospital food is good, but I definitely would prefer something that someone would make me or think specifically about me to bring. So that meant a lot to me. And of course, when you get home with a brand new baby, there's so much to think about, especially when you have multiple kids to feed. You know, with Maddie, it's just kind of like nice because the baby sleeps a lot, and so you can rest or you can feed yourself during that time. But when you have multiple kids, gone are those days when you can think about yourself. So it's so nice to have food that somebody made for you just in the fridge or the freezer that you can just warm up, and it means so much to people. And then too, when people aren't feeling good, you know, I just recently had a few surgeries, and it was the same thing. I didn't really plan for the surgeries. They were kind of emergent, last minute type of surgeries. And so I didn't have a whole lot of food. And so, you know, my mom came over, brought me some food, my sister, and it meant the world to me. So I'm telling you, there is so much joy in not only making dishes for people, but also just thinking about those times when people shared food with you. And so casseroles are just really a great way of sharing food, as well as lasagnas, because it's kind of a no-brainer. Everybody likes them. You can heat them up whenever you need food, and they're easy to make. So if you like Mexican-inspired food, this is a great dish for you. Okay, and that looks great. We're gonna bake it 375 for 50 to 55 minutes. Coming up next, packed with whole grains, protein, and real food ingredients, this chocolate chip banana bread recipe is the perfect bread to share with your family and friends. We're rounding out the Joy of Sharing show with one of my favorite things to give and receive, which is banana bread. Is there anything better than fresh, warm banana bread that somebody delivers to your door? Well, maybe chocolate chip cookies, but they're a close tie. So we're gonna make this chocolate chip banana bread, and it has fiber, protein, and all the good nutritious stuff added to it, and nobody will ever know. They will honestly ask you for this recipe. It is so good. So I started with 3 ripe bananas that I added to a bowl, and we're gonna mash these up. A 1/4 cup of maple syrup, 1/3 cup of applesauce, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter or nut butter of choice, 2 eggs, a 1/2 cup of peanut flour, 1/2 cup of sweetener of choice, 1 teaspoon of baking powder and baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 cups of oat flour, and a 1/2 cup or more of chocolate chips. So we're gonna start by mashing up the bananas and 2 eggs. So a huge part of my healing from eating disorders was coming into a place where I found peace with food again. And maybe you haven't gone through eating disorders, but maybe you've struggled with your weight or with different issues with your body or food. And I think a lot of women especially, but some men as well, struggle in that area. And if that's ever been a place of pain for you, honestly, baking and cooking and learning to nourish and fuel our bodies with ingredients that God designed us to eat is really one of the most healing things, I think. And so that's how I really just started to learn how to cook and to bake, is I started to get into the kitchen and started to learn and research about different ways to fuel my body so that it was helpful and nourishing in healing my body as well as my emotions. And so that's how I ultimately ended up learning how to cook and bake, just experimenting and just getting in the kitchen. And like I said, just doing some research and learning about different ingredients that are nourishing to our bodies. So that was really where it all began for me. And then it even spread even further because I really started to love to share the food that I made with people. And not only share the food, but also share what I was learning about, different ingredients like oat flour and almond flour, and how foods that are lower in the glycemic index or foods in their more natural state is much more nutritious for our bodies. And so that's kind of how Dashing Dish came about. That's how it was born. It's just me sharing food and recipes and tips with people that I loved, and more people kind of came around to learn and to enjoy my food. And so I've been doing this for over 12 years and I still love it just as much. So one of my favorite things is to entertain, through food and have people come to my house, or just even make my family a meal. I think sometimes we think that sharing food has to be in a way that we're bringing a food to somebody that's in need or someone that we love, but it really starts in the home. So you cooking for your kids or your husband is a way that you can share the gift of food with the people that you love the most. So I added all of our ingredients to a bowl and I'm just mixing them up here. And once this is all combined, I will put it into a loaf pan that we sprayed with cooking spray. And you can either add the chocolate chips right now and kind of bake them into the banana bread, or you can top it with the chocolate chips. I like to do a little bit of both so that the banana bread has the chocolate in it, but also you can see the chocolate chips on top as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the chocolate chips, most of them to the banana bread. I like to use Lily's chocolate chips or dark chocolate, so something with a little bit more nutrition in them and a little bit less sugar. Dark chocolate has wonderful benefits. It is high in iron, and that is always a really good thing when it comes to feeding kids, especially because with kids it's a little bit harder to make sure that they get enough iron through their diet. So dark chocolate is a surefire way to make sure that they get some iron. So we're just gonna spread that batter out. That looks good. And then we're gonna top it with the rest of the chocolate chips. And we're gonna bake this 350 degrees for 50 to 60 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. Well, I hope this show inspired you to share something that you love with those that you love. I'm gonna pack up this food and head over to the neighbor's house. If you wanna find any of these recipes, you can head over to dashingdish.com where you'll find recipes and more to nourish your body and soul.